All right, I have a great show for you. I know that many of you are frustrated with the current US economy, the high inflation, feeling abandoned by your government, your civic leaders. Today, I have a special guest with me, Batia Ungar Sargon, to go over how to improve the situation, how to make America the land of opportunity. Batia, thank you so much for joining me today.
I'm so humbled and honored to be here with you, Stephen. Thank you so much for having me.
So you're an author. You've been fighting for the people. I know that many of the people that I associate with, I would say that they would consider themselves middle income to upper income families. They tell me regularly that they are struggling. They feel like the government has abandoned them, that inflation's out of control, gas prices are out of control, food costs are out of control. Everything seems to be rising. How has the American worker been abandoned? And if so, what examples do you have of that?
I believe that they have been abandoned by both sides. Certainly prior to Donald Trump, you had a situation where one party, the Democrats, were advocating for kind of a strong welfare state and higher taxes. And the other party, the Republicans, were advocating for a kind of trickle down economics where it was sort of hands off, lots of free trade, lots of immigration, chamber of commerce siding with corporations. And the thing about both of those models is they're both hostile to the working class. And this is what I found when I was traveling the country interviewing working class people from all backgrounds is on the one hand, they don't want higher taxes. They don't want more welfare. They know a lot of people who are scamming the welfare system who are choosing not to work. And working class people are very proud of working. So they don't like the Democrats' model, but the free market model with free trade and the offshoring of manufacturing and these trade deals that just favor other countries, China and Mexico, at the expense of the American worker, they don't like that either. They don't like policy that has no checks and balances on, the level of arbitrage that you can have, the financialization such that you have a corporation getting sold to another corporation, and all they want is to maximize profit at the expense of workers. So both of those models were really hostile to the working class. Now, the Republicans had never, claimed to represent labor, but the Democrats' betrayal was very deep because, the Democrats used to be the party of labor. And what happened over the course of the last 40 years was they abandoned the working class to cater to college educated elites and the dependent poor. And that is now who the Democrats represent, a weird coalition of rich progressives and then poor people who live off the government. And if you look at their policies, each of their policies is designed to put money in the pockets either of poor people or of very over-credentialed, multiple degreed, college educated couples on the coast. And they really abandoned the, 70% of Americans who are working class, middle class. And it's even worse than that. They engaged in a plunder of the middle class. So in the 70s, the largest sector of our GDP was in the middle. Today, the largest sector of the GDP, over 50% of our economy, belongs to the top 20%. These people with multiple degrees in the knowledge industry, they have sort of squeezed all of this GDP out of the middle class into the top 20% at the expense of the working class. It's been a big upward transfer of wealth from hardworking Americans to knowledge industry types over the last 50 years.
Yeah, I think a lot of people feel that where uh, our parents growing up, they would work for a company most of their career, they'd have a pension, they'd be taken care of. Corporate raiders wanted every penny they could get. They come in, they start really legalizing business, taking advantage of the stock market, and like you say, squeezing the labor to the point where now we're like, okay, we'll just get rid of the worker and we'll have robots, right? Or
Mhm.
we'll have automated. And now I just read that Walmart is seriously considering going back to human cashiers, not because it's the right thing to do and it provides jobs, but because they're being stolen from at such a rapid rate that they're now losing profits, right? And so they're not really doing it for the good of humanity. But I think a lot of people that are watching this program, I think they would consider themselves middle class America. And I think that they do. They feel squeezed. And you know, many of them are baby boomers. They're probably better off than younger generations. But when I used to go on TikTok, I would see trailing millennials and Gen Z, and they're crying. They're saying, "My gosh, I have 2 jobs. I have 3 jobs. I still can't make it. My parents raised us on one income." What are your thoughts about the emotions that people are, you know, able to project through social media about their work conditions and their financial conditions?
It's totally unacceptable. There's been a massive, because of this squeeze that we're talking about, it squeezed a lot of people who used to be middle class down into the lower classes, but it squeezed a bunch of people up into the top 10%, 20%, and they took all of that GDP along with them. And that was very much by design. So it didn't, that wasn't an accident. It's not an accident. There's no like will of God behind the way the economy turned out. There's no natural reason that things should have ended up that way. They were the result of very intentional policies by 3 Democratic presidents. Started with President Bill Clinton signing NAFTA into law. We lost 5 million very good paying working class jobs to China and Mexico, where they're now building up their middle class. And then President Obama showed up and very intentionally defunded vocational training in high schools, which used to be a huge propeller of working class Americans into the American dream and the middle classes, because, of course, the skilled trades are a very good job. It's a very good occupation. And we used to spend a lot of money on training up the next set of skilled trades folks. Now we give $200 billion a year to fund higher education and just 1 billion to the skilled trades. I mean, how is that acceptable? And this is not, again, it's not an act of God. It was an act of Obama, who decided, if you don't have a college degree, you're nothing. Why should you have the American dream if you're not going to go to college and become a good Democrat? And then, of course, President Biden showed up, opened the border, and welcomed in 10 million people to compete with working class people for those jobs. You know, jobs like manicurist, hotel cleaning person, bar back, these used to be jobs that you could afford to buy a home with on a single income back in the 70s. And they no longer are, because there are just millions and millions and millions of illegal immigrants and legal immigrants who are now competing specifically for those jobs. So the Democrats took an economy where the most of the GDP was in the middle, and they said, no, we're going to take all of the over 50% of the GDP and reserve it for our constituents, for our base, for people who go to college. And if you don't go to college, which of course we know is like a woke manufacturing company, right? Like, you go to college, you come out woke, right? Then you don't deserve the American dream. This was very much implemented by design, and it could be very easily undone.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's what we want to see. You know, what I have 3 young children, and I don't speak to them in terms of their grades. Of course, I want them to get good grades, but I speak to them in terms of, you need to graduate, you need to find a good partner, you need to develop skills. Skills are what pay the bills, and then you need to look for opportunities that will provide for a family. And we're very strategic about teaching them that, hey, you have to have money, you have to have these skills to move forward. But I didn't realize so little money was put towards trade. No wonder Mike Rowe of Dirty Jobs is out there saying, you know, there's plumbers making 100 grand, there's electricians making 80 grand. You know, those jobs are out there, and they're in need. And most people don't realize they could actually go back to school or back to trade school and get those skills, and those skills would then help them pay their bills.
Yeah, but we've also simultaneously, along with making like only college educated people be able to achieve the American dream and own a home, and people with a college degree live longer, they make on average $1 million more, not because they deserve it, but because of the way the Democrats set up the economy. Along with all of that, there has been a cultural revolution in which we treat masculinity as a crime, and we treat machismo and being a male provider as being some sort of relic of a patriarchal past. And we sneer. The people who create the culture, they have created a culture that sneers at good, hard work, especially the kind that men do. And as a result, they telegraph to all men in high school, if you don't go to college, you're a loser. If you go into the trades, you're a loser. It's not about the money, although, of course, it is also about the money. But what they did was like it was all in lockstep. They created an economy in which basically, if you don't go to college, you're not going to be able to make it. And then along with that, they created a culture that sneers at hard work and sneers at men and makes them second guess themselves. And we devalued one of the most important institutions in a civilized society, which is men providing for their families, men as protectors, and along with that, there's just been this huge crisis, a spiritual crisis in the working class, along with this economic crisis. I mean, it really goes hand in hand. There's a lot of work to do, but we could turn this around. We really could, and we just need to want to.
Yeah. Just I think it was yesterday I read, maybe it was a couple of days ago, but that there is worry that there could be a collapse in real estate coming because single men are no longer pursuing women the way that they used to. And because they're no longer pursuing women the way that they used to for partners, for sex, for children, they're not buying houses and they're just saying, well, I'll just rent. And so there's this worry about this collapse. And so that this kind of fits in with what you were just saying, where the American male is put down, and yet for hundreds of years, that was the model that worked to push forward a healthy, functioning society. Um, you're familiar with Dr. Jordan Peterson, right?
Yes.
Yes, he talks a lot about this as well, where men are extremely beat down right now. Obviously I'm out of the dating market, thank goodness. But I see this younger generation where they want a male that's over 6'2", has to make $200,000 a year, no debt, college degree, good looking, good with children, and it's like, okay, so now all these women are chasing like less than 1% of the male population, and the male population is going, wow, all these women are chasing me, I can just sleep with whoever I want. It's really upending a society built around family and family values. What are your thoughts on that?
I totally agree. It's so funny because there is this weird standards thing happening where now women seem to have gotten a lot of the control in the dating market. Their standards for men are very high. Height is a really big issue. And what happens is, like you said, all of the women are chasing the top 10% of men or a certain kind of man. And the rest of the women they basically, the people who suffer the most from not being partnered are actually men. So single women who sort of, are in their 30s and their 40s, who never end up getting married or having kids, they are actually much less unhappy than men who never end up getting a partner. And it is just devastating. I mean, and to make matters worse, this college divide is very real. So when women go to college, they come out much more liberal than men who go to college. Women who go to college come out at 75, 80% come out calling themselves very liberal. And people who identify as very liberal will not date people who are conservative. And so we're creating a situation where there's going to be a mating crisis. I mean, it's already starting, where people are not going to be able to find partners and not be able to settle down and create thriving families and thriving communities. And it's a disaster. I mean, we've effectively, through things like the Me Too movement, have criminalized the kinds of mating behaviors that were like totally normal for like all of human history. And as a result, we're making people incredibly, incredibly unhappy. It's so, so sad. And I agree with you. You meet these young people, young men and young women who just cannot find a partner. And what kind of a future are they going to be able to picture for themselves? What kind of a future are we going to have as a country, as a nation, if we can't find solutions to these problems?
Yeah. I read this is a totally different country, but I read that over in China, they're also having the same issue, but because they focus so much on birthing boys for the military, now you have this small population of Chinese women, and you have a large population of Chinese men, and it's so expensive to live there now that people aren't marrying, to the point where they're marrying dolls and robots and cartoons. And it's like, wow, like we've really thrown things off. And hopefully we can come back from that. I want to talk about your book, Second Class. But one final question. I don't know if you saw this today, but Donald Trump is going to his criminal trial in Manhattan. Well, he was greeted by thousands and thousands of union workers who are typically Democrat voting, and they were cheering USA, 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 and they're saying, "Wait a minute, I have these Democrat values from like the JFK era, but my leaders don't give a crap about me. They don't care about me anymore. I'm not getting a livable wage. They're fighting for the heads of Google versus the employees of Google, and they're feeling really beaten down." And the head of the New York Union said that they did a poll internally of 9,000 employees, and 3-1 said they're voting for Donald Trump simply because they believe he will work for the working class American. I don't know if you saw any of that or if you have any thoughts on that.
I've been following it very closely because I've been arguing for a while now that there's only one centrist running for president right now, and it's Donald Trump. The left likes to portray him as an extremist, but if you look at his policies, he sounds like a 90s era Democrat. In the 90s, the Democrats believed that abortion should be limited to 15 weeks. In the 90s, the Democrats believed in policing the border to protect labor. In the 90s, before Bill Clinton, the Democrats believed that trade should favor American workers, not Chinese workers, and the CCP. In the 90s, the Democrats represented unions and labor. They were pro-gay, which Donald Trump is. They were the home for Black voters, which Donald Trump is working very hard to become. It's unbelievable to see unions having to admit the fact that their rank and file love Trump. They don't like the GOP because of what we discussed in the beginning. They feel that the GOP, the old school GOP, the Chamber of Commerce version of the GOP, was antithetical to their interests, but they love Trump because he came out of the gate in 2015 with an economic agenda that was tailor-made for the working class and the working man, and he put money back in their pockets. And so there's been this huge disconnect for the last 8-10 years between the union leadership and then the rank and file. And that just busted open in those images we saw today of union members just cheering Trump on, like the joy in their faces, the support for this man, and the love that he has for the working man. I mean, it was really, really powerful. And Donald Trump met with the head of the Teamsters Union in January, and he got a historic thing to happen after meeting with the head of the Teamsters Union. The Teamsters Union gave $45,000 to the Republican Party for the first time in 20 years because Trump convinced them that he was a contender. And this is like unheard of for a Republican candidate. So he really changed the game. He's now polling at over 50% of Hispanics. He's polling at 35% of Black men. He might get as much as double that. So we're really looking at a historic moment where there is a candidate who's representing labor, the multiracial working class coalition, not because of vibes, but because of actual policies he put in place on trade, on immigration, on all of the things that really matter to the working class.
Yeah. I saw, I'm trying to remember the exact numbers, but the CNN, MSNBC, I read all of these every day to be balanced, but they were saying, oh, Biden's the first president in so many decades to walk a picket line with the union workers, right? And then behind the scenes, you find out he was there for about 12 minutes and he only spoke to people for about 58 seconds. And then he got in his car and he left. So he showed up, he got his picture, he got his sound bite, and then he abandoned the workers. And that's what I feel like is happening, right? Is like they use their mouth to say all of the things that they do, but then their actions, their heart is far from the people, right? And so I think that they're feeling that. So just in our final minutes here, tell me about Second Class. You've got this great book. It's getting incredible reviews. What are we going to learn in it, and why did you write it?
So I wanted to know, who is the American working class and do they still have a fair shot at the American dream? And so I traveled around the country for a year interviewing working class Americans of every race and religion and industries across the board, of every political persuasion. And what I found was, the most amazing thing I found was that people are completely not polarized. Polarization is a totally elite phenomenon. You talk to working class Americans who vote for Democrats, who vote for Republicans. They work next to people who vote differently. They pray next to people who vote differently. They drop their children off at school, where they go to school with the kids of people who vote differently. They could not care less. They have no spiritual investment in politics in the way that the elites do. And they're very united on the policies that they think would help make their lives easier. They want access to housing. They want access to good paying jobs. They want much less immigration. They want access to affordable healthcare that's high quality. They want their children to have choices like they did. And instead, we're seeing all of that stuff disappear. Owning a home is becoming so unbelievably difficult for working class people. Healthcare is unaffordable because of administrative costs, because of the cartels in these different industries. Immigration has resulted in absolute downward pressure on working class wages. I mean, it's wage theft. The Democrats' platform is wage theft of the working class, whether it's the open border, whether it's the Green New Deal, whether it's student loan forgiveness. All of this stuff is simply an upward transfer of wealth from the working class to the elites. And working class people know this, and they know who, the enemy is, and it's not their fellow American. It's the political parties that don't care about them. And so the book is really, I tell the stories of these working class people who welcomed me into their lives and into their homes. And we talked about what policies would help them, and just this absolutely unified vision of what the country should look like that I heard from liberals and conservatives who really agree on most issues. So, the best example of this is, I interviewed Linda. I spent time talking to her, a woman from West Virginia, big Trump supporter who works for Amazon. And I interviewed Amy, a gay certified nurse's aide who lives in Florida, who voted for Biden. Let me tell you something, Stephen. There is not an issue that they didn't agree about. I mean, these women were completely in agreement on the issues, whether it was Amy, the gay CNA, who told me she thought if you take a child to a drag show, you should go to prison, and thought that it should be unbelievably difficult for anybody, including adults, to transition, because that is, a very, very, very scary thing to contemplate for a society. Or whether it was Linda, who took in her gay nephew after he was kicked out of his home, right? This is the Trump voter in West Virginia. They both had the same views on immigration, the same views on funding the war in Ukraine, which they both opposed, the same views on homeless veterans. They were both very upset about. I mean, very little distinguished these two women's ideology. And if they met each other, they would really get along. That's America right there. That is America.
Yeah, well, I say on my channel all the time, I'm interacting with Democrats, Democrat family members, Democrat people I go to church with. We are so much more alike than we are different.
Totally.
It's these political elites that want to create division between us, right? My wife read a story one time of a jar of ants. So they had two different species of ants, and they lived perfectly in harmony. Every now and then they had a little issue, right? When someone shook up the jar, they start attacking each other. And I think that's what's going on, is these elites, they're shaking the jar. They're trying to get you and I to hate each other over religion, or skin color or jobs or money or income or whatever it is, if they can sow division, then they can keep us distracted from the fact that they're destroying the country. They're destroying, traditional family. They're destroying, the things that have worked for hundreds and hundreds of years to create a good, habitable society. So I'm excited for people to read the book and learn more. Where can I point them to follow you online? Do you want me to point them towards Amazon? Where should I point them?
Amazon is great. We've been doing very well there, thank God. People have really been responding to the book. So if people wanted to pick up a copy on Amazon, I believe it's about $20 right now. I think that's the best place because if you go to my publisher, I think they're charging a little bit more. And you could find me on Twitter, although I don't recommend anybody spend any time on Twitter. I'm on Instagram as well. But if you do read the book, let me know what you think. I would love to hear from people, how they connected with it and if it meant something to them.
Great. Well, Badia, thank you so much
Thank
for
you so
coming
much.
on, spending time with us. I'll put those links down below, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. God bless you, and thank you for everything you do.